It started like any other morning in the neighborhood, quiet and painfully ordinary. The sun was barely up, the air still cool, and the street was lined with perfectly identical houses that looked like they had been copied and pasted straight out of a catalog. I had just bought a brand new car the previous weekend, something I'd been saving for over a year. It wasn't some flashy sports car, just a sleek black sedan that still had the dealership tags on it and that unmistakable new car smell. I parked it proudly in my driveway, washed it twice in 3 days, and probably checked on it more than I should have. But when you work hard for something, you tend to protect it like it's made of glass. I didn't know that same pride would set off the storm that was coming. Across the street lived Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood called her that not because it was her actual name, but because she was the embodiment of every HOA nightmare imaginable. She was the self-appointed watchdog of the block, always walking around with her little clipboard, peering into people's yards, and reporting anything that didn't fit her version of perfection. Too many trash cans outside, Karen called it in. Grass half an inch too tall, she took pictures and emailed the HOA. But cars, oh, she had a special obsession with cars. Karen hated seeing anything that ruined the aesthetic of the neighborhood. According to her, cars should be parked perfectly, cleaned weekly, and never, ever left in the driveway overnight. She thought driveways were only for temporary parking. It was ridiculous, but most people just ignored her. I wasn't so lucky. That morning, I was standing by my window, coffee mug in hand, when I noticed Karen outside with her little dog, glaring across the street at my driveway. Her lips were moving, and even from a distance, I could tell she was muttering something unpleasant. I didn't think much of it. She complained before about my trash bins and even once about my Christmas lights being too bright. I figured this was just another petty annoyance. A few hours later, I went out to run errands. When I stepped onto the porch, I immediately felt that something was off. My stomach sank when I saw my car. The entire left side of the vehicle was scraped, dented, and covered in long streaks of white paint. The mirror was hanging loose, shattered. My heart stopped. I froze in disbelief, staring at the mess. It looked like someone had driven straight into my car and then backed out without a second thought. I dropped my coffee cup, spilling it all over the porch, and ran toward the car. My brand new car. The one I had barely driven 3 times. I crouched down, trying to assess the damage, hoping it wasn't as bad as it looked, but the truth was right there: deep gouges in the door, a cracked tail light, and fresh tire marks cutting into my driveway. That's when I noticed something else. The marks didn't just stop at my car, they curved around and led straight across the street to Karen's driveway. My pulse started to pound. I followed the tire tracks with my eyes and saw her white SUV sitting there like nothing had happened. Except, there was a huge dent in her front bumper. And streaks of black paint that matched my car perfectly. I stood there for a moment, my jaw clenched, trying to process what I was seeing. No way, I thought. She couldn't have. But deep down, I knew she had. Nobody else would be been that reckless or that entitled. I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything: my car, the tire marks, her SUV, the angle of impact. I even got a few shots that showed the line between the damages. It was all there, clear as day. Then I noticed something else: my security camera mounted above the garage. My heart leapt with a mix of relief and anger. I pulled up the footage right there on my phone. The video loaded, and within seconds, there it was. Karen's SUV backing out of her driveway, swerving slightly, and then scraping the entire side of my car before speeding away like nothing had happened. She didn't even stop. No hesitation, no apology, just pure arrogance. I stood there, shaking. The more I watched, the angrier I got. She didn't even bother to leave a note. I walked across the street and knocked on her door. Her little dog barked like it always did, and a few seconds later, she opened the door, looking annoyed. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "You hit my car," I said, holding up my phone. She blinked, pretending to be confused. "Excuse me." "My car," I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "The black sedan in my driveway. You backed into it this morning. I've got the whole thing on camera." Her expression flickered just for a second, but then she forced a laugh. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. I didn't hit anything. Maybe someone else did. You can't just accuse people without proof." I tilted my phone so she could see the video. The color drained from her face. The footage showed her SUV scraping against my car in perfect detail. Her hand tightened around her door frame. "Looks like proof to me," I said quietly. She started stammering, trying to come up with some excuse about her blind spot or how it didn't look that bad. But I was done listening. "You're paying for the damage," I said flatly. "Or I'm calling the police." That's when she changed tactics. Her voice got sharp, defensive. "You shouldn't even have that car parked there. The HOA rules state no overnight street or driveway parking. You're the one violating policy, not me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had just damaged my car, and now she was trying to turn it around on me. It was classic Karen logic. I didn't even respond. I just turned and walked away. When I got back to my house, I made 2 phone calls, one to the police to file an official report, and the second to my towing company. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to wait until the police arrived, but I said no, I wanted her car off the property that same hour. I wasn't taking any chances. When the tow truck showed up, Karen came running out of her house, screaming about harassment and illegal towing. But she parked half her SUV on my property line when she hit my car, and that was all the justification I needed. The tow driver just shrugged and did his job. Within minutes, her white SUV was being hauled away while she stood on the sidewalk yelling and threatening to call the HOA president. I didn't care. The damage to my car hurt, but watching her car being pulled off the property felt like justice. The officer who showed up later confirmed everything after seeing the footage. She was cited for property damage and trespassing. That night, as I sat on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, the same quiet neighborhood felt different. Calmer. For once, Karen wasn't walking her dog or patrolling the block. Her driveway was empty, and the street was finally peaceful. My car was still scratched, still dented, but it was more than just metal now. It was proof that sometimes, even the worst kind of neighbor learns that they can't bully everyone forever. The day after the tow truck hauled away Karen's SUV, the neighborhood was buzzing. You could almost feel the curiosity spilling from behind the blinds. Every person on the block had either seen it happen or heard the commotion, and for once, the whispers weren't about someone's lawn or mailbox paint color. They were about Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, finally getting a taste of her own medicine. I wasn't exactly proud of how satisfying it felt, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't make my morning coffee taste better. Still, I knew it wasn't over. People like her didn't just let things go. They stewed, plotted, and came back louder than before. Sure enough, before noon, There was a knock at my door. Not a polite one, either a series of sharp, angry bangs that rattled the glass. I opened it slowly, and there she was, standing on my porch with that same smug face, only this time her voice was trembling with fury. "You had my car towed," she shouted, as if the entire street needed to hear. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I kept my tone calm. "You hit my car, Karen. You left the scene. That's called property damage and fleeing the scene of an accident. The police saw the footage, remember." She folded her arms, her lips pressed so tightly they turned white. "That tow was illegal. My car wasn't on your property. It was halfway on my driveway when you hit my car," I said evenly. "The tire marks are still there. You want to take a look?" She ignored that and switched tactics. "The HOA is already aware of what you did," she snapped. "You can't just have someone's vehicle removed like that. You're in violation of association policy." There it was again, the HOA card. Her favorite weapon. I almost laughed. "Karen, you're really going to quote HOA rules right after committing a hit and run?" Her face flushed bright red. "This isn't over. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tonight. The HOA will decide what happens next." And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her little dog yapping behind her as if it shared her outrage. I closed the door and sighed. I knew this wasn't just a tantrum. She'd call every friend she had on the HOA board, twist the story, and try to turn it into something she could control. The problem for her was that I had proof, plenty of it. Between the photos, the tire tracks, and the security footage, her lies didn't stand a chance. Still, I decided to prepare. I spent the rest of the afternoon printing everything out: the police report, the insurance claim, screenshots of her car on my property, even the time-stamped video stills. If she wanted a fight, I was ready for one. By 6:30, I could already see cars starting to line up in front of the clubhouse at the end of the street. The HOA hadn't wasted any time calling their emergency meeting. I walked over just before 7, carrying my folder of evidence under my arm. The moment I stepped inside, every head turned. The air was thick with tension and whispers. Karen was sitting right at the front next to the HOA president, her arms crossed, chin tilted high like she'd already won. The president, an older man named Greg, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began. "It seems we have a rather serious dispute between two homeowners that needs to be addressed." He looked at me. "Mr. Langston, you had Mrs. Harris's vehicle towed yesterday, correct?" "That's right," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And you believe she caused damage to your vehicle?" "I don't believe it," I replied. "I know it. I have video proof." Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "He's trying to turn the whole neighborhood against me because I asked him to follow parking rules." I opened my folder and placed a stack of printed photos on the table. "Here's the footage stills," I said, sliding them toward Greg. "You can see her SUV backing out of her driveway, swerving, scraping my car, and then driving away. The police already confirmed it in their report." Greg picked up the photos, his eyes widening slightly as he flipped through them. The room went quiet. Even a couple of Karen's usual allies leaned forward, whispering to each other. She tried to maintain her composure, but the tremor in her hand as she adjusted her glasses gave her away. "Well," Greg said carefully, "these images are pretty clear." Karen leaned forward. "That doesn't excuse him having my car towed." He had no authority to do that. It wasn't he blocking his property. It was parked halfway over my driveway, I said, cutting her off. The police verified that too. I filed the report before calling the tow company. I pulled out the final piece of paper and placed it on the table, the incident report signed by the responding officer. Everything I did was within my rights. Karen's voice cracked. This is harassment. You've been targeting me ever since I joined the board. I couldn't help but laugh softly. You've been targeting everyone, Karen. I'm just the first one who stood up to you. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, Greg sighed and looked around the table. Given the evidence, I don't see any wrongdoing on Mr. Langston's part. If anything, Mrs. Harris, it seems you owe him an apology and payment for the damage. Karen's face went pale. You can't be serious. I'm afraid I am, Greg said. We can't have board members setting poor examples. This is not how we resolve disputes in this community. That word board members hung in the air. I hadn't realized she was still officially part of the HOA board. But I could tell from Greg's tone that she wasn't going to be for much longer. He looked exhausted, like he'd dealt with her antics one too many times. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the tile. This is absurd. You're all taking his side because he has a fancy new car. None of you care about the rules. Greg raised a hand. That's enough, Karen. Sit down. But she didn't. She stormed out, muttering under her breath about lawyers and revenge. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the room. Everyone sat quietly for a moment before Greg turned to me. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, he said. We'll make sure the HOA doesn't interfere any further. And, thank you for handling this the right way. I nodded. I just want to live in peace like everyone else. The meeting ended not long after, and as I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. The sky was dark, the street lights humming softly, and for the first time in a long while, the neighborhood actually felt calm. No yelling, no accusations, no clipboard patrols. When I got home, I sat on my porch and looked across the street at Karen's house. Her driveway was empty, her windows dark. For once, she wasn't out inspecting lawns or snooping around. Maybe she was realizing that her control over the neighborhood wasn't as solid as she thought. Maybe she was just plotting her next move. Either way, I was ready. Because that night proved something important, the HOA's power only worked if everyone was too afraid to challenge it. Once someone stood up, once someone said enough, the whole illusion started to fall apart. And after seeing Karen's expression in that meeting, I knew one thing for sure, she wasn't used to losing. But she had lost this one, and I had no intention of giving her another chance to win. The days after the HOA meeting were unusually quiet, almost eerily so. For the first time since I'd moved into the neighborhood, there were no passive-aggressive emails, no unexpected notes on my door, and no early morning walks from Karen patrolling the street with her little dog and her phone camera. It felt like peace had finally settled over the block, but a part of me knew better. People like her didn't just give up. They retreated, regrouped, and waited for the perfect moment to strike back. Still, I allowed myself a few days to breathe. My car had been repaired, the insurance had come through faster than expected, and the HOA had made it clear they wanted no part of the drama. For a while, it almost felt normal again. That illusion shattered one Saturday morning when I walked outside to find a bright orange sticker plastered across my front window. Notice of HOA violation, it read in bold letters. I felt my jaw tighten as I tore it off and scanned the list of violations. My grass was half an inch too long, my garbage bins had been visible from the street, and my car had an unapproved decorative license frame. It was laughable, but the fine at the bottom was $500. I didn't need to guess who had filed the complaint. It had Karen's fingerprints all over it. I walked straight to my security system's online log, and sure enough, there she was on the camera footage at 6:43 a.m. sneaking across my yard with her clipboard and measuring tape, peering over my trash bins like she was conducting a government inspection. My anger burned hot, but underneath it, something colder was forming a plan. I wasn't going to lose my temper this time. I was going to end this once and for all. I started with a phone call to the HOA president, Greg. When I explained what had happened and sent over the footage, he groaned audibly. "I thought we were done with this," he said. "She's not even on the board anymore. She got removed after that last meeting." That was interesting news. "Then how did she issue a violation notice?" I asked. "She shouldn't be able to," he admitted. "That's impersonating an HOA officer. Send me everything. I'll handle it." But I wasn't satisfied with just letting him handle it. Karen had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, hiding behind rules she barely understood. She dehumiliated people, fined them, and made them afraid to even park in their own driveways. It was time she got a taste of her own medicine legally, of course. The next day, I went to the county records office and did a little digging. It didn't take long to uncover that Karen had been violating plenty of HOA policies herself. She had an unauthorized shed in her backyard, 2 large satellite dishes mounted illegally on her roof, and multiple unregistered guests living at her property for months at a time, all clear violations. She'd been so busy controlling everyone else that she'd ignored her own rules. I made copies of everything, printed it neatly, and attached stills from her security footage showing her trespassing on my property. Then, I filed an official complaint with the HOA and the city. Trespassing, harassment, falsified HOA documentation, and property interference. I didn't want revenge just for myself, I wanted to stop her from ever doing this to anyone else. A week later, a hearing was scheduled. Karen showed up wearing oversized sunglasses and that same air of superiority, pretending not to be nervous. Greg sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 new board members who clearly had no patience left for her antics. I sat opposite, calm and collected, with my folder of evidence. Greg started the meeting by outlining the accusations. "Karen, you're being charged with multiple HOA violations, as well as harassment and unauthorized use of HOA authority. Mr. Langston has provided footage, documentation, and an official police report to back up these claims." She scoffed. "This is absurd. He's just trying to get back at me because I held him accountable for breaking the rules." I didn't say a word. Instead, I slid a printed screenshot across the table, her on camera, trespassing on my property, holding a clipboard, measuring my grass. Then I added the county records showing her own code violations. Greg leaned forward. "Karen, this is your property, correct?" Her face froze. "Well, yes, but..." "And you're aware these structures are not approved under HOA guidelines." She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her confidence was cracking, her cheeks turning bright red. Greg exhaled slowly. "I think we've heard enough." He turned to me. "Mr. Langston, on behalf of the HOA, I want to formally apologize for the repeated harassment you've endured." Mrs. Harris, he turned to her, effective immediately, Your access to all HOA operations and communications is revoked. You're also being fined for multiple violations on your own property. You'll be required to dismantle the unauthorized structures within 30 days or face additional penalties. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do this to me. I've been part of this community for 10 years. And you've made it miserable for just as long, Greg said, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard. This neighborhood deserves better. The meeting ended in silence. Karen stormed out without looking at anyone, muttering under her breath. I stayed behind for a moment, thanking Greg and the other board members. They seemed genuinely relieved that someone had finally stood up to her. As I walked back home, the weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for months started to lift. The air felt lighter, the street quieter. A couple of my neighbors waved as I passed, something they hadn't done in weeks. One of them, a retired man named Bill, leaned over his fence and said with a grin, "Heard you finally took down the queen of the HOA." I laughed. Guess so. Took long enough. Over the next few days, the transformation was obvious. People started chatting again on the sidewalks. Kids played basketball in driveways without anyone yelling about noise violations. For once, the community felt like an actual neighborhood instead of a tiny dictatorship. And as for Karen, her house grew quieter too. The for sale sign went up a month later. Maybe she realized she couldn't rule over people who weren't afraid anymore. Or maybe she just couldn't stand living across the street from the guy who finally beat her at her own game. Either way, I didn't miss her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rows of houses, I sat on my porch looking at my freshly washed car, the same one she'd smashed all those weeks ago. The paint gleamed under the fading light, spotless and whole again. It wasn't just about the car anymore, though. It was about the principle, the fight to reclaim peace in a place that had forgotten what it felt like. Sometimes justice doesn't come with loud victories or big speeches. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of calm streets, friendly neighbors, and one less bully hiding behind a clipboard. I took a slow sip of coffee, smiled to myself, and watched as a light breeze carried away the last of the old neighborhood tension. The HOA was still there, the rules still existed, but for the first time in years, it felt like they actually worked for the people who lived there, not against them. And as far as I was concerned, that was the best ending this story could have had.